Hi there, church. Today is day 32, and our topic for today is Get a Testimony. So, my reading is from Revelation 12:11. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. So, how many of you, when you heard someone give a testimony where God did something special for someone, so whether it was a job, a healing, or a supernatural provision, how excited did you get? And what did it do to your faith? Because every time there's a testimony, it increases our faith. It does something that boosts our faith up. And because the important thing is that God wants us to share our testimonies. Because when He does that, when we do that, that could be the reason, because the enemy has to then take a backseat. When we give our testimony, what happens is that we then increase the faith of people around us. Suddenly the faith level of everyone increases, because why? We suddenly realize that God is a God of provision. God is a God of healing. God is a God of testimonies. And you must know that what the enemy wants is to shut us down. He wants us to not give out our testimony. Because why? Because as soon as we give out our testimony, He knows that there's victory in our lives. But today I want to talk to you about your testimony. Because if we don't share the testimonies of how God is working in our lives, then others are tempted to think that God is not working at all. And how often do we not share the testimonies, the good things that God has done for us? So when we look at what Jesus did on the cross, He triumphed on the cross. He broke the curse of sin so that we could break the cycle of sin. So think about it. That's what Jesus did. He broke the curse of sin. And we could now break the cycle of sin. We no more have to walk in sin. But why? But God can deliver us from anything. And by the way, we seal the victory that God did on the cross through our testimonies. So our victory doesn't just remind us that the victory has already been won. They also remind us that the enemy has already been defeated. So when we are sharing a testimony, we are loaning our faith to others. And when we listen to a testimony, we are borrowing faith from others. But either way, the church is edified and God is glorified. So anytime you hear a testimony or you give a testimony, always know that we are glorifying God. And at the same time, the church gets edified. So when we give a testimony, there's two things that can happen. And firstly, a person that gives a testimony is the one, it's the first person, and no one can go back and tell him that he was wrong. No one can, because why? Because if you were in court, the first person testimony is more credible than a second person's testimony. A first person testimony is what they actually saw, whereas a second person's testimony is hearsay. So remember this Samaritan woman. So let's look at what she did. When Jesus touched her, she was the first person testimony. But when she went down to the village and she told them what Jesus did, to them it was hearsay, because they could talk about it, but they never experienced it. But they needed their own encounter with Jesus, and that is exactly what they got. The transition from second-hand to first-hand faith was evidence in their words. And this is what they said. They said, "Now we believe, not because of what you told us, but because we have heard Him ourselves." So today, just to let you know, we can't live off someone else's testimony. We get excited when we talk about others' testimony, but we need to ask God, what is my testimony? And as we spoke yesterday about spelling it out, that's how you get your testimony. When you go to God and you talk to Him, and when you pray and you push through, is when you receive your testimony. When God answers, you can now go out and talk to people and tell them, this is what God did for me. So the question is, what is your testimony? How are you going to define what God is doing for you? And my testimony, as I would have spoken to some of you would have known, was when I suffered with fear, when I struggled with fear. And you know what? I took it as that was part of me. I grabbed onto fear and I held onto it until God had to show me and reveal to me that fear was not part of my life. And sometimes we do that. We hold on to poverty. We hold on to sickness. We hold on to, because why? We don't believe that God can give us a testimony. And you know what? As soon as God delivered me of that fear, I was able to live life to its fullest. The reason I'm sitting here today, my testimony is that was because of fear of man, fear of everything, fear of darkness. And I was so afraid that I would not be able to speak and talk. And this is my testimony. For me to talk to you is because of what God has done for me. So my question to you today is, what is your testimony? Because every time we give a testimony, remember, the church gets edified, but God gets the glory. So the question is today, won't you go and pray and ask God, what is my testimony? At the same time, I encourage you to phone someone in church and you tell them your testimony, what God has done for you, that they will in turn reach out and ask the question and start praying and saying, God, I want my own testimony. So today, just to close, the question is, what is your testimony? Thank you.